The market was silent when she walked through the gates. Silent not because no one was there, but because everyone was watching her. Their eyes followed her steps, heavy with pity, heavy with judgment. She was not just a girl anymore. She was a price, a trade, a way for her family to pay their crushing debt. Her name was Lyra. She had grown up on the dusty plains of her home world, dreaming of stars, of freedom, of choosing her own path. But that morning, those dreams were broken. Her father had signed the papers. Her mother had looked away, and Lyra, only 19 years old, was given away as an alien bride. The auctioneer spoke in a loud, booming voice, his words cut through the air like a blade. Sold to settle the debt, he declared. Her fate now belongs to her groom. The crowd shifted, whispering. Some felt sorry, others were curious, and a few were cruel enough to laugh. Lyra kept her chin high, but inside her heart pounded. She did not know who waited for her. She had heard stories, terrible stories. Some brides were taken by warlords, some by cruel traitors, some by beasts who treated them like trophies. She imagined chains, cold metal rooms, and endless darkness. When the guards pulled her toward the ship, she did not fight. She knew there was no escape. Her wrists were bound with a glowing restraint, and her long dark hair fell across her face, hiding her tears. The ship's doors opened with a hiss, and she was pushed inside. The interior smelled of iron and smoke. Shadows stretched across the metal walls. 2 alien guards stood at each corner, their eyes glowing faintly red. They said nothing, but their silence was worse than words. Lyra sat in the corner, knees pulled close to her chest. Every vibration of the ship reminded her she was leaving her world forever. As the engines roared and the planet disappeared beneath her, Lyra tried to breathe, but fear pressed heavy on her chest. She thought about her family. Did they care? Or were they only relieved that their debt was erased? A bitter thought cut into her mind. They had traded her life for their comfort. Time passed in silence, but her mind was not silent. Her imagination painted pictures of her groom. In her head, he was a monster with sharp teeth, or a tyrant with burning eyes. She told herself not to cry, not to beg. If she was to suffer, she would suffer with dignity. Then she overheard the guards whisper. Their voices were low, but her ears caught fragments. The groom. Not like the others, one muttered. Dangerous, the other replied. But strange, he does not treat brides as property. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. What did that mean? Was he cruel in another way? Or something worse? Hours turned into a blur. She drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. Each time she woke, the same thought returned. Who is waiting for me? Finally, the ship began to slow. The sound of metal grinding filled the air, and the guards pulled at her feet. Her legs trembled. She stumbled, but they held her firm. Ahead, the docking doors opened, revealing a strange new world. The sky outside was a deep violet, streaked with green lightning that cracked across the horizon. Towers of black stone rose in the distance, and alien banners rippled in the wind. The air was thick, heavy, and foreign. Lyra's heart pounded faster. Each step felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff. She was led down a long metallic bridge where shadows moved in the distance. Waiting, watching, the guards' grips tightened as they guided her forward. At the end of the bridge, a tall figure stood, his face hidden beneath the hood of a dark cloak. For a moment, Lyra thought her lungs would stop working. This was it, her groom, her master, her nightmare. The figure stepped closer. His boots echoed against the metal floor. The hood shifted back just enough for her to see his face. Her breath caught. It was not an alien. It was not a monster. It was a human, a man. Lyra froze. Her mind could not understand. What was a human doing here on this world among these people? Why would he buy her? Why would he claim her as his bride? The man's eyes met hers. They were not cruel. They were steady, calm, but filled with something she did not expect. Not hunger, not greed, but something else, a weight she could not name. Her heart thundered. The whispers of the guards came back to her mind. Not like the others, they had said. And in that moment she knew her fate was about to twist into something far stranger than fear. Lyra had been sold as a bride to pay a debt, but her groom was the last thing she ever expected. The moment Lyra realized her groom was a human, her thoughts twisted into chaos. She had been ready for a monster, ready for chains, ready for pain, but the man standing before her was calm, silent, and strangely human. His presence unsettled her more than fangs or claws ever could. The guard stepped back as if they respected him, or perhaps feared him. The man gave them a single nod, and without a word they released her restraints. The glowing bands on her wrists faded into nothing, leaving faint red marks on her skin. She rubbed them slowly, unsure if she was truly free or simply walking into another kind of prison. "Come," the man said at last. His voice was deep, steady, carrying no cruelty. Lyra hesitated, but her legs obeyed even as her mind screamed to run. He led her through the massive gates of the alien fortress, his cloak dragging across the stone floor. Inside, the halls were lit with strange blue fire that gave off no smoke. Alien warriors stood guard along the walls, their weapons sharp, their eyes glowing faintly. Yet none of them moved as she passed. None of them dared to meet the human's gaze. Lyra's curiosity gnawed at her fear. Who was this man? Why was he here among aliens who clearly were not his kind? Why had he purchased her when he could have chosen power, wealth, or freedom instead? They walked in silence until they reached a chamber lined with glass windows. Beyond them stretched the alien city, filled with towering spires, glowing markets, and ships that rose and fell like silver birds. The sight stole Lyra's breath. She had never seen such a place, both terrifying and beautiful. "This world," the man said at last, "is not your prison. You are safe here." His words were meant to comfort, but they only confused her. Safe? How could she be safe when she had been sold like cattle? "Why?" Lyra asked quietly, her voice trembling. "Why did you buy me?" The man turned, and for the first time, she saw his face clearly under the dim light. He was scarred, not hideously, but in the way of someone who had lived through too many battles. His jaw was strong, his eyes dark with shadows of a past she could not guess. "To protect you," he answered simply. Lyra's chest tightened. His answer made no sense. Men who bought brides did not protect them. They used them, they owned them, they broke them. But this man, he stood like a shield, not a chain. He did not offer further explanation. Instead, he led her to a small chamber. The room was plain but warm, with a bed of soft cloth, a table, and a single glowing lamp. It was not a cell, not a cage, but it was still strange. "You will stay here," he said. "No one will touch you. No one will harm you." Then he turned to leave. Lyra's hands clenched. "Wait," she whispered. "What's your name?" He paused at the door. For a long moment he did not answer. Then at last he said, "Kale," and the door closed behind him. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, her thoughts racing. Who was Kale? Why did the alien guards fear him? Why did he speak of protection instead of ownership? None of it made sense. That night, she could not sleep. She listened to the faint hum of the fortress, the distant sounds of alien voices echoing through the halls. Every creak of the walls made her tense. Every shadow seemed alive. When morning came, Kale returned. He brought food, strange fruit that glowed faintly in bread that was warm and soft. Lyra stared at it. Then at him, suspicion burned in her chest. Was it poisoned? Was it trick? "Eat," he said. "You will need strength." Her stomach ached with hunger, but still she hesitated. Kale sat across from her, taking a piece of the bread and biting into it himself. Only then did she taste the food. It was sweet, almost too sweet, and filled her with warmth she had not felt in days. "You still do not trust me," Kale said, not as a question, but as a statement. Lyra looked away. "You bought me," she whispered. "How can I trust you?" His gaze lingered on her, unreadable. "I did not buy you," he said slowly. "I saved you." The words struck her like thunder. She wanted to believe him, but her heart fought against the idea. Saved her? From what? From whom? Her chance to ask more vanished when a loud alarm echoed through the fortress. The walls pulsed with red light. Alien guards rushed past the door, their voices sharp and urgent. Kale stood instantly, his calm shifting into cold focus. "They know you are here," he muttered. Already, Lyra's blood turned to ice. "Who?" she asked, her voice breaking. Kale looked at her, his jaw tight. The ones who wanted you sold. The ones who would rather see you dead than free. The door burst open, and alien soldiers stormed inside, their weapons aimed, their voices harsh. Kale moved faster than Lyra could follow. His cloak snapped like a shadow as he struck the first soldier. The weapon clattered to the ground. Lyra pressed against the wall, heart pounding, the room filled with chaos. Shouts, crashes, the glow of weapons. But through it all, Kale stood unshaken, moving like a warrior trained in shadows. When the last soldier fell, silence returned. Kale's chest rose and fell with steady breath. He turned to Lyra, his eyes sharp. "Your journey is only beginning," he said, "and if you wish to survive, you must stay close to me." Lyra's fear mixed with something new, something she had not expected. She did not know if it was hope or danger or both. But one thing was clear, her life was no longer hers to control, and the path ahead was darker, stranger, and far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. The fortress was no longer safe. The air carried tension, whispers of betrayal, and the echo of enemies waiting in the shadows. Lyra could feel it in her bones. Every corridor she walked through seemed heavier, darker, like the walls themselves knew her name and her fate. Kale moved quickly, leading her through narrow tunnels beneath the fortress. His cloak brushed against the stone, and his silence spoke louder than words. Lyra wanted to ask questions, but each time she opened her mouth, fear strangled her voice. At last, they stepped into a hidden chamber, a place filled with soft light and the faint hum of alien machines. Lyra's eyes widened. The room was unlike anything she had seen. Walls lined with glowing screens, maps of stars hanging in the air, weapons mounted with care. This was no Groom's chamber. This was a war room. Kale turned to face her. His dark eyes studied her, calm but unshakable. For the first time, Lyra saw the weight in his gaze, not the gaze of a man buying a bride, but of a soldier carrying too many secrets. "You deserve the truth," he said at last. His voice was low, but it carried power. "You were not sold to me by chance, Lyra. You were sold because others wanted you destroyed. The debt was only an excuse." Her throat tightened. She shook her head. "Destroyed? Why? I am no one." Kale's jaw clenched. "No one does not get hunted across star systems." He stepped closer, his presence filling the chamber. "Your bloodline carries something valuable, something dangerous to those in power. That is why your family's debt was used as a chain. They wanted to erase you." Lyra's heart thundered. The room felt smaller, the air tighter. She backed against the wall. "No, no. That's impossible. I'm just a farmer's daughter. I have nothing. I am nothing." Kale's eyes softened, but his voice did not waver. "You are more than you know." For a long moment silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the glowing maps. Lyra wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare, but she could not, and deep down, a part of her believed his words. The sound of boots echoed beyond the chamber. Kale's hand went instantly to the hilt of a blade at his side. His every movement was sharp, practiced, like a predator ready to strike. He gestured for her to stay silent. The door opened, and instead of soldiers, a single alien entered. His skin shimmered like silver, his eyes glowing faint blue. He bowed to Kale, but his gaze lingered on Lyra. "She is the one," the alien murmured in a strange accent. "The council will not stop until she is gone." Lyra shivered at his words. Kale dismissed the alien with a nod, and when the door closed again, he looked at her. "Now you see, you were not sold as a bride. You were sold as a sacrifice." Her legs gave way, and she sank onto a chair. Her hands trembled. "Why you?" she whispered. "Why did you take me instead of letting them kill me?" Kale's silence was heavy. His eyes shifted away for the first time, as though the answer was too heavy for words. Finally, he said, "Because once, long ago, I was also sold, and no one came to save me." The weight of his confession settled over her. Lyra stared at him, and for the first time she did not see him as her captor, but as something else, something broken yet unyielding. That night, Kale allowed her to rest in the chamber. He stood guard at the door, his blade never leaving his side. Lyra lay awake, staring at the glowing ceiling. Questions swirled in her mind about her bloodline, about Kale's past, about the enemies hunting them both. But above all, one question echoed louder than the rest. Who truly was Kale? When dawn broke, the chamber doors opened to reveal a world outside the fortress. Kale led her onto a balcony that overlooked the alien city. The spires rose into the violet sky, and ships darted like fireflies through the air. The beauty was overwhelming, but Lyra could not ignore the feeling that danger lurked in every corner. From this moment, Kale said, his voice cutting through the wind, "You are bound to me, not by law, not by chains, but by survival. If you walk away from me, they will find you. If you stay, you may live." Lyra's breath caught. His words were not a command, but a choice. For the first time since her life was sold, she realized her fate was not only in the hands of others. Her voice was barely a whisper. "And if I stay, will you protect me?" Kale's gaze locked with hers, steady and unbroken. "With my life," he said. The words settled into her chest, heavy and strange. Not what she expected from a groom, not what she expected from a stranger. And for the first time, Lyra felt something stronger than fear. She felt the beginning of trust. The city beneath the fortress was alive with color and sound. Markets glowed with strange lights. Creatures of all shapes moved through the streets, and the sky hummed with ships darting above. Yet to Lyra, it all felt distant, like she was watching from behind a glass wall. Her mind was not on the city, but on Kale. He was her groom, but nothing about him fit the story she had been told. He did not chain her, did not shout commands, did not treat her as property. Instead, he kept his distance, speaking only when necessary, moving like a shadow between danger and silence. For 2 days, Lyra stayed in his care. Each morning Kale brought food, strange fruits, roasted meats, and soft bread. Each night he stood guard near her door, as if daring the world to touch her. His actions confused her more with every passing hour. Finally, her curiosity broke through her fear. One evening, as the alien sky glowed green with storms, she asked, "Why do they fear you? You are human, like me." Kale was silent for a long moment. He sat across from her, sharpening a blade that glimmered with alien runes. His dark eyes lifted to hers, and she felt the weight of his past pressing into the air. "Because I do not belong," he said quietly, "and because I fight harder than they expect." Lyra frowned. "Belong? You live here, don't you?" His lips curved in something that was almost a smile, but not quite. Living here and belonging here are not the same. She wanted to push further, to demand answers, but before she could, a thunderous knock shook the chamber doors. Kale rose instantly, his hand on his blade. The doors opened, and an alien messenger stepped inside, his silver skin flashing in the dim light. "The council demands her presence," the messenger announced, his eyes darting toward Lyra. "They will decide her fate." Lyra's heart twisted. Fear shot through her. She looked to Kale, hoping for denial, for reassurance. But he only nodded once, his jaw tight. "You will not go alone," he said firmly. "I will stand beside you." The walk to the council chambers was long. The halls were lined with statues of alien lords, their faces carved in cold stone. The guards flanked every step, yet their eyes shifted nervously whenever Kale moved. Lyra felt the weight of their stares, the judgment, the whispers. The chamber itself was vast, with a ceiling so high it vanished into shadows. A circle of alien elders sat upon thrones carved from black stone. Their eyes glowed in different colors, blue, red, gold, yet all of them fixed on her. "She is unworthy," one elder hissed, "a debt-born bride, a child with no value." "Then why is she still alive?" another snapped. "Why did you not finish what was started?" Lyra's breath caught. Their words struck her like daggers. They spoke of her life as if it were nothing more than a broken coin. Kale stepped forward, his cloak swirling behind him. His voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Because she is under my protection." The council murmured, some with anger, some with fear. One elder leaned forward, his golden eyes burning. "You risk your standing for a girl who is nothing. Why?" Kale's face was stone, but his voice carried iron. Because I will not let her fate be decided by those who see only bloodlines and debts. The chamber fell silent. Lyra's heart pounded. She could not look away from him. For the first time, someone had spoken for her, not against her. The council's decision came swift and cold. Then her life is tied to yours, the elder declared. If she lives, you live. If she dies, you die. Lyra gasped. Kale only bowed his head, accepting without hesitation. When they left the chamber, Lyra grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. Why would you do that? Why would you tie your life to mine? Kale's eyes met hers, steady, unwavering, because that is the only way to keep them from killing you. The words left her trembling. She wanted to hate him, to fear him, but her heart was betraying her. A seed of something new had been planted, a fragile, dangerous hope. That night, as the alien storms raged outside, Lyra sat awake, her thoughts tangled like vines. Kale was not the monster she expected, not the captor she feared. He was something else entirely, something she could not yet name. But deep inside, she knew one truth. Her journey with him was only beginning, and every step forward would pull her deeper into a world of danger, secrets, and a bond she never chose, yet could no longer escape. The council's decision weighed heavy on Lyra's heart. Her life was no longer her own. It was bound to Kale's, tied by law, tied by survival. If she died, he would fall with her. If he failed, her blood would stain the stone floors of the fortress. Days passed in tense silence. Kale kept her close, watching every shadow, every whisper in the halls. He moved like a man expecting an ambush at any moment. His hand never strayed far from his blade. Lyra could feel the storm growing, though no one spoke of it aloud. At night, she dreamed of the council's glowing eyes, of Kale's steady voice standing against them, and always she woke with the same question burning in her chest. Why did he protect her with such certainty? Her chance for answers came sooner than expected. One evening, as the alien sky burned with streaks of violet lightning, Kale led her through the lower tunnels of the fortress. The air smelled of smoke and oil. The walls hummed with the sound of hidden machines. "You must see," he said, his voice sharp. "Only then will you understand why they hunt you." They reached a chamber filled with holographic maps, shimmering in the air. Lyra's eyes widened. The map showed not just the fortress or the city, but entire star systems, marked with symbols she could not read. Dozens of red marks pulsed like warnings. Kale pointed at one glowing mark. "This is where your family once lived, not by chance, but by design. They placed you there to hide you, to bury your bloodline in plain sight." Lyra shook her head, her voice weak. "I told you I'm no one." Kale's eyes locked with hers, cold but not cruel. "No one does not have enemies like these." Before Lyra could respond, an explosion shook the chamber. The walls trembled. Dust rained from above. Kale's blade was in his hand before the echoes faded. "They found us," he hissed. The doors burst open. A wave of armored soldiers flooded the chamber, their weapons glowing with deadly light. Lyra stumbled back, her heart pounding. Kale moved forward, his cloak snapping like a shadow. He struck fast, disarming the first attacker, his blade flashing in the glow. The room erupted into chaos. Soldiers shouted in alien tongues. Energy bolts tore through the air. Kale fought with brutal precision. Every movement honed, every strike calculated. Lyra pressed against the wall, helpless, terrified, yet unable to look away. Through the smoke and fire, a figure emerged, larger than the rest. His armor was black as night, his eyes glowing with a sickly green light. His voice rumbled like thunder. "Give her to me, Kale. She is marked. Her blood is forbidden. She cannot be allowed to live." Lyra froze, her body trembling. The soldier was not speaking of her as a bride or a woman, but as something far more dangerous. Kale stepped between them, his blade raised. "You'll have to kill me first," he growled. The armored figure laughed, a sound that echoed like stone breaking. "Then so be it." They clashed. The chamber shook with every strike. Sparks flew as steel met steel. Kale moved like a storm, But his opponent was stronger, each blow forcing him back. Lyra's chest burned with panic. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs would not obey. At last, Kale struck a heavy blow, forcing the armored figure to stumble. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her toward the exit. "Move," he barked. They ran through the tunnels, smoke and fire chasing their steps. Lyra's breath came in sharp gasps, her heart hammering. The fortress that once seemed like a cage was now a battlefield. When they reached the surface, the city itself was in chaos. Ships roared overhead. Soldiers clashed in the streets. The sky glowed red with fire. Kale pulled her into the shadows of a ruined wall, his eyes scanning the battlefield. "This is only the beginning," he said, his voice harsh. "They will not stop until you are dead. And if they cannot kill you, they will burn entire worlds to find you." Lyra's hand shook, her voice cracked. "Why? Why me? What am I?" Kale looked at her, and for the first time, there was no shield in his eyes, only truth. "You are the key to ending their empire," he said. "That is why they fear you." The words struck her like a blade. She could not breathe, could not think. Her life had been nothing but dust and silence. And now she was told she was the center of a war. As the city burned around them, Lyra realized her journey was no longer about survival. It was about secrets older than her, enemies stronger than she could imagine, and a destiny she never asked for. And through it all, Kale stood beside her, the strange groom who had tied his life to hers, a man she did not fully understand, yet could not let go. The city burned behind them. Flames reached the sky. Alien ships howled through the air, and the streets ran red with sparks and fire. Kale pulled Lyra through the chaos, his grip firm but never cruel. He moved with the precision of a soldier who had lived through wars, always knowing which corner to turn, which shadow to trust. Lyra stumbled beside him, her lungs burning. Fear pressed down on her like iron. But something else stirred inside her, too. A strange pull whenever she looked at Kale's back. He was fighting not only for himself, but for her, and that truth echoed louder than the screams around them. They slipped into a hidden passage beneath the streets. The tunnel was dark and narrow, water dripping from the ceiling. Kale lit a small lantern, the glow carving sharp shadows across his scarred face. Lyra watched him closely, searching for answers in the silence between his breaths. Finally, her voice broke the quiet. "Why are you doing this? You could have left me. You could have walked away." Kale did not look at her. His eyes stayed fixed ahead. "Because I know what it means to be abandoned. I will not let it happen to you." His words sank into her chest like fire. Lyra swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, to say she was not worth the risk, but the truth in his voice silenced her. The tunnel opened into an abandoned hangar. Rusted ships rested in the shadows, some broken, some still alive with faint power. Kale moved to one of them, a small vessel with worn metal and scars of old battles. He ran his hand along the hull, as if greeting an old friend. "This will take us away from the city," he said, "but only if you trust me." Lyra hesitated. Her gaze moved from the ship to Kale. "Trust," she whispered. "That's not something I've had in a long time." Kale's eyes met hers, steady and unshaken. "Then start here," he said simply. They boarded the vessel. The air inside smelled of oil and dust. The control panels flickered weakly. Kale's hands moved quickly, pressing switches, turning levers. The ship hummed to life, shaking as if reluctant to wake from its slumber. As the engines roared, Lyra strapped herself into a seat. Her hands trembled against the worn fabric. Kale glanced at her, his voice calm. "Hold on." The hangar doors cracked open. Lights spilled in. The ship rose, rattling as if it might fall apart at any moment. Then, with a burst of speed, they shot into the violet sky, leaving the burning city behind. Lyra pressed her hand to the glass, watching the world shrink beneath them. A strange ache filled her chest. She had left everything she knew, even the dust and silence of her old life. But ahead of her was only darkness and war. Kale's voice pulled her back. "They will chase us. You must be ready." She turned to him, her fear clashing with something new. "I'm not a fighter," she whispered. I don't know how to be ready. Kale leaned closer, his gaze fierce but not unkind. Then you will learn, and I will teach you. The promise in his voice struck her deeper than she expected. Lyra's heart raced, not just from fear, but from the bond forming between them. She had been sold as a bride, treated as nothing. Yet here was a man who saw her as someone worth saving, someone worth fighting for. Hours passed as the ship carried them through the void. Kale guided it with steady hands, his eyes scanning the stars. Lyra sat beside him, silent, her thoughts tangled. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer than before. I told you I was once sold. Do you want to know the truth? Lyra nodded, her chest tight. I was taken as a boy, Kale said, his eyes distant, sold to warriors who wanted a weapon. They trained me, broke me, tried to strip away my humanity, but I fought, I survived, and now I fight so no one else has to suffer the same fate. Lyra's breath caught. She saw the scars not just on his skin but in his soul, scars carved by years of pain. Yet through it all he stood, unbroken. Kale, she whispered, her voice trembling, why me? Why risk everything for me? He looked at her then, his eyes steady. Because you remind me that I am still human, and because if I let them destroy you, then everything I survived means nothing. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not empty. Something unspoken passed between them, fragile but powerful. Lyra's fear softened, replaced by a fragile thread of trust. When the ship finally drifted into the quiet of deep space, Kale set the controls to auto. He leaned back, his body weary. Lyra watched him, and for the first time since her life had been sold, she felt more than fear. She felt safe. But deep inside, she knew safety was only an illusion. The war was far from over. The enemies would not stop. The bond forming between them would be tested by fire. Still, as Lyra closed her eyes and leaned back into the seat, she allowed herself one small thought, one fragile hope. Perhaps she had not been sold into chains. Perhaps she had been sold into destiny. The stars stretched endlessly before them, silent and cold. Yet Kale's words still echoed in Lyra's mind. She had been sold as a bride, but instead of chains, she had found a man who carried scars deeper than she could imagine, a man who fought not to own her, but to protect her. For days, they drifted through the void, avoiding patrols, hiding from warships that searched the skies. Kale barely slept, his eyes always scanning the maps, his hand always close to his blade. Lyra watched him, her heart torn between fear and something she dared not name. One night, as the ship floated in the shadow of a dead moon, Kale broke the silence. They will not stop. The Council fears what you are. They will burn systems to ash to erase you. Lyra's voice shook. And what am I, Kale? Tell me the truth. He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the stars. Then at last he said, You are a memory they tried to bury. Your blood carries a legacy of leaders who once defied their empire. If you live, that spark rises again. If you die, the fire dies with you. Lyra's chest tightened. The truth was heavier than chains. She was no longer just a girl. She was a symbol, a threat, and a target. Before she could reply, alarm screamed through the ship. Kale leapt to the controls. They found us, he growled. Through the glass, warships emerged, their dark hulls glowing with green light. Dozens of them, surrounding Kale's fragile vessel like wolves circling prey. Lyra's heart raced. We can't fight them, Kale. We'll die. He turned to her, and for the first time, there was no mask in his eyes, only raw resolve. We may, but not today. The enemy ships fired. Beams of burning light tore through the darkness. Kale's hands moved with impossible speed. The ship swerved, engines roaring, explosions flashing around them. Lyra clung to the seat, terror and awe twisting together. But no matter how skilled Kale was, the enemy was too many. A direct hit shook the ship. Alarms blared. Smoke filled the air. Lyra coughed, her vision blurred. Kale's voice cut through the chaos. The engines won't hold. We need another way. He pulled a small device from his belt, a beacon glowing faint red. Lyra frowned through the smoke. What is that? A call, Kale answered. For allies who owe me a debt. Before Lyra could ask more, another blast struck. The ship spun, metal groaning. Cale grabbed the controls, his voice steady even as fire spread. "Listen to me, Lyra." Her eyes burned with tears. "Don't say it, don't. You must survive," he said firmly. "If you fall, all of this was for nothing." The ship lurched. A hole tore through the hull, air rushing out into the stars. Cale dragged her to an escape pod. His hands were rough but careful, fastening the straps across her chest. "No," Lyra cried, gripping his arm. "Not without you. I won't leave without you." Cale's gaze softened. For the first time, a small smile touched his scarred face. "You were the last thing I expected, Lyra, but the best thing I found." Her heart shattered. "Cale." He pressed his forehead against hers for the briefest moment, then pulled back. His voice was steady. "Live, and make them regret ever hunting you." Before she could stop him, he hit the controls. The pod launched, spinning into the void, through the small window. Lyra saw him one last time, standing at the heart of the burning ship, his blade in hand, facing the storm of war alone. Her scream was swallowed by silence. The pod carried her away, faster and faster. The enemy ships closed in on Cale's vessel. Fire and light engulfed it, and then it was gone. Tears blurred Lyra's vision, her chest aching with grief and rage. But in the hollow of her heart, something burned, not despair, but fire. The fire Cale had seen in her blood, the fire that could not be extinguished. She had been sold as a bride to settle a debt. She had expected chains, pain, and death. Instead, she had found the last thing she ever thought possible. Someone who gave his life to give hers meaning. And as the stars stretched endlessly before her, Lyra swore one vow, whispered into the void. "I will not waste what you gave me, Cale. I will fight. I will rise. I will live."